Thank you very much also for your kind presentation, and thank you for having me here today at this panel. Quite a lot of interesting inputs have been already, pitched out by the former speakers, and deliberately, I don't have any slide. I want just to talk, and I wanted to give myself the freedom to interact also with the things that were said by those that were talking before me and possibly after me. Well, a lot of things have happened since, let's say, January, February, and a lot of changes are going on. I am not quite sure that, if you remember, there was quite a lot of talking about nothing will be the same and everything will be changing. Back in February, March, it seems a lifetime ago. But quite a lot of things are sort of like coming back to a business as usual, if you want, even though there have been quite a lot of disruptive elements. I would go on trying to say something according to the timeline. So first, I'll take the short period. Of course, particularly in our case, if I may, we were the first Italian ports to end up into a lockdown, and already in the 5th of March. So we were essentially probably the first port outside Asia that was impacted so much by COVID-19 in the beginning. And liking it or not, we were in a sort of way trailblazers, also improvisers, because nothing was so clear back then. And WHO wasn't really helping. Actually, it's not really helping even right now. So back then it was even less. And quite a lot of things had to be done, and had to be done quickly, without really knowing or being able to foresee what were the possible outcome of those things. So again, short period, we have put in place guidelines, and involving literally in a week, we have involved all the major stakeholders of the ports, essentially, ship agents, terminal operators, truck drivers and truck drivers association, hauliers, logistic operators, and VOCC, and we put them all together. Well, the pool workers association and the trade unions, we put them all around a virtual table, and we opened up a discussion that literally in a week ended up into drafting 3 sets of guidelines that were used in order to minimize the exposure to the virus and to minimize any potential disruption. As somebody else has said before, the minimizing or avoiding any human physical contact was a priority back then. Again, it seems another era, but it was only 3 months ago. But back in March, early March, what we had done was trying to eliminate any possible interaction between the ship and the berth and the drivers and any other operators, so that we were not kind of contaminating the vessel. The people that are in the P&I know better than me, but in my former life, I also worked quite a lot extensively in marine insurance. So I was sort of ready for avoiding any possibility that ship owners could have consequences or being blacklisted by subsequent ports and so on and so forth. So we managed, let me put it in this way, 50% luck and maybe 50% merit. We managed to really minimize any potential disruption to the ports activities. Just to give you an idea, within the North Adriatic ports, we've got 20,000 workers, and we had only 2 cases of COVID-19 individuated, immediately isolated, and immediately contained, and nothing else. And we never lost 1 day of operation. So again, it would be totally unrealistic to say that it's all our merit. So I will never say anything like that. There was a big component also of luck, probably, or chance, or whatever you think, or blessing, depends what are your convictions. But on the other hand, we were quick enough to put things in place and to put procedures in place, and also to enforce them very strictly, which was another point. So This was the first takeaway from this situation. We learned that it's important to have a quick reaction. It's important to have rules in place. It's important to enforce them. It's important to teach to every single piece of the supply chain that their role is fundamental in limiting the spread of a disease and in avoiding any operational disruption. As I said, then all the things that were happening here, we share them as a systemic level, and were applied in all the Italian ports. And I have to say that we have managed all the 16 port authorities of Italy. We managed not to have any major disruption, and also to host a significant amount of cruise vessels that were on their way between February and March, and that they are now hosted by Italian ports, with all the stress that you may imagine is subsequent, because people were arriving into a port with already the hinterland already saturated with the intensive care units in the hospitals, a lot of difficulties, but nevertheless they managed to handle the problem already present in the land and the situation according to the vessels. So this was a big team effort together with the local authorities, national authorities, and international authorities as well, together with the ship owners. Some remarks that are moving now still in the short midterm in terms of how the things are shifting and the impact that they can have on the Mediterranean ports. First point first, a lot of vessels started to skip Suez, and started due to the combined factor of dropping prices in oil and bunkers and in the costs of Suez Canal. A lot of vessels between March and April started to circumnavigate Africa again and skipping the Suez Canal. That has involved a significant drop into the traffic of a lot of Mediterranean ports, and more than anything has kind of it was breaking down the strong relationship of Far East Europe trades and the rising numbers that in the recent years we saw in terms of Mediterranean container throughput. That's a sort of like a wake-up call. It's scary, and it's been scary, but it's telling us that nothing can be taken for granted. A lot of things that I'll come back in a moment to that. A lot of the infrastructuring assumptions and even dogmas, if I may say, that in the last decade were spread all over we made a lot of seminars and symposiums and BRI, the infrastructure, blah, 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 blah. We saw that a 4-micron virus has put everything legs up and changed completely everything. They simply skipped the Mediterranean. Not so significant, but an alarming wake-up call. And the blank sailings and the whole impact that they had in the way that transshipment hubs and final destination gateway ports had. Again, a lot of the bread and butter rules that we were basing our analysis upon in the last 10 years went simply bananas. And so again, I think that we really need to have a more resilient and more flexible approach on things, because of course infrastructuring and developing ports has a long lifespan, but on the other hand, these events, these disruptive events are happening more and more. And this time it happened with a pandemic. Again, talking about insurance, there will be quite a lot of climate change disruptions. There will be a lot of things that are happening in the next future, and that we need to be ready for that. And we need to be able to have, let's say, flexible plans that are applying on the short to midterm. Again, some things were already touched. The nearshoring, reshoring in the midterm, it will have an impact, and the reshaping of global value chains. It was already a movement that was there even before the COVID, but we've seen that we can't put all the eggs in one basket, so to say. And that's what essentially we've done for 20 years, putting most of the low cost or mid cost manufacturing all together into one single country. And when that single country was hit by whatever reason, the whole production in several different countries, also those high-end manufacturing countries, were on their knees. And this has an impact, of course, in the flows of trade and as a consequence in the port activities. Again, was that wise thing to do? Probably not. And this was a big wake-up call that certain movements that were already happening in the markets have to be kind of expedited and made faster. That doesn't mean that we will bring back everything, but that some parts of the production and manufacturing should be rethought and should be replanned, probably on a more regionalized basis. And when I speak on region, at least we can think about the Mediterranean basin and the African side of the Mediterranean basin. For a long time, a lot of European ports and Europe in general hasn't thought about Africa and the African country and the rising of the economical situation in most of the African countries as an opportunity. We were looking too much eastbound, and probably we should be starting to look again southbound, because the Mediterranean basin, and as we said, the regionalization of those trades could be a great opportunity, a huge opportunity for growth and development, possibly in a sustainable manner. And again, we will and we have to develop, thanks to this, again, as I said, wake-up call, to move from the idea that ports are infrastructure nodes to the idea that ports are industrial and manufacturing clusters. And so, you know, we need to create a sort of ecosystem, a port ecosystem, where things are, you know, the interrelations of between terminals, port operators, port authorities, hauliers, all the activities, industries, for those who can have industries within their ports, things are moving together. So you're kind of helping shortening the supply chain, making more efficient productions, using the advantages of being already on berth, on the water, and improving and making a better connectivity to the mainland or the inland services. In this way, possibly applying a modal shift to more sustainable ways of transportation and developing this a better, more sustainable way of transporting and building a logistic. In this, BRI and EU Green Deal, you may think that they are completely unrelated. I do believe that we need to kind of talk to them, at least from the Euro-Mediterranean point of view. A lot of ports and a lot of planning were based or taking the assumption of the infinite growth that would be granted by BRI. Things are not as quite, and things will probably be even worse, considering the worsening situation of the internal economic situation of China, which will probably have much less money to invest or waste in foreign projects, most of which, or many of which, have no real economical and financial feasibility. We always cite and quote Habantota, but water as well is kind of going into a difficult situation. Kyupki in Myanmar, a lot of situations that were, again, taken for granted will be probably put under discussion and huge revision in the next years. And on the other hand, as European ports and as European connectivity system, we can use this to build a better, more sustainable, not just green, you know, everybody's just talking about the decarbonizing. Decarbonizing is just a part of it. It's making a better engineering new business models, moving towards different situations. And again, I go back to some assumptions that were there in the market for at least a decade, which is due to the regionalization of the new regionalization of trades. Do we still need so many huge mega vessels? Are those still huge mega vessels able to use their economy of scale to generate profit? Or in turn, are they becoming a burden for their ship owners and the alliances because they are not really able to use them fully? And again, ports that were planning to make intervention for the next 20 to 30 years, immobilizing a lot of capitals and making big changes in their land and territory. Can they still do that? And can they still foreseeable see ROIs and significant financial feasibility to those projects? Or shall we rethink and be more flexible in what we're going to do in the next future? And last but not least, this will probably have an impact, at least in the containers, for the strength of certain companies, and maybe we will see in the next three years more consolidation and changes, and that not necessarily will imply an improvement for the end user, particularly the cargo. When I was working for the shipping lines, I was taught that cargo is the king, and cargo was sort of like the unsung hero of the whole thing, because all the leverages have been given mostly to the ships and to the ship owner side, and that's not really working anymore. And the energy transition. I was yesterday attending the IAPH webinar, and quite surprisingly, but not so surprisingly, apparently they did a survey recently, the last 40 days, to the majority of ship owners, and they were saying, will your green decarbonizing plans be changed after COVID? And the vast majority said, absolutely. So, I mean, so are we really able to hit the Agenda 2030 goals? Are we really sticking to those 2050 decarbonizing goals, or we will go back to business as usual because productivity and profit generation are taking again the first place and the first line at the expenses of the decarbonization? All these things all together can be a great opportunity, but at the moment are kind of shaking some of the basic assumptions that we were using in the last year to make our analysis. So I would say to conclude, Rahm Emanuel, that was the chief of staff of Barack Obama, said, never let a good crisis to go to waste. So essentially, we need to use this terrible, difficult moment for the best. We need to go further into planning, green intervention, sustainable intervention, but in a more holistic way. We need to think that we as ports and we are just one ring in a whole global chain. The way that things are made and done needs to be more interconnected. The consequences of our choices needs to be put on a longer lifespan, time span. And we may, and this is, think about new metrics in order to evaluate what is really good and what is not good for the markets and for overall the global value chains. In this, I think that the European Mediterranean ports can play a better, a more visionary role if we want and if we are able to take the challenge. And we should do that because it will be great. It will be great for the markets. It will be great for granting an economical and financial feasibility. And to my point of view, it will be also very funny to do so. And so let's bring our feet back to the ground and plan with a 2050 perspective at least. Thank you very much. I conclude.